in front of everybody. But Katie is here to do that. Please welcome Katie Jameson to the stage. Okay, I'm pretty nervous, so okay. Speaking here tonight is an honor I never dreamed of. I never thought that I would be standing up here, sharing good words and high praise for an organization that saves lives and saves babies. I didn't think our story would be told at a night like tonight because our story is different. We are a NICU family. My husband and I spent hours and days and weeks beside the bed of our newborn baby son. We fought as hard as we could, and we were surrounded by care and love daily. We wrapped our boy in the best and brightest hopes and did what every family in that situation does. We prayed that he would come home. But our baby boy did not come home. He didn't live, despite the best and most miraculous attempts. I didn't think our story would be told because usually at events like this, you hear stories of success, perseverance, and survival, so that anyone who has never been through a NICU experience can understand what is at stake. But perhaps hearing what our family went through is an even better way to do that. To hear about a fight, followed by a loss, followed by the deepest gratitude for everything that was done for us. Our son's name is Lochlan. He was born on April 5th, 2014, and he was perfect. He was born with a magnitude of health issues that ranged from cosmetic to fatal. He had so many medical concerns that even to this day, I couldn't begin to explain them to you. He had 10 fingers and 10 toes, and he had funny little blisters on the top of his head. He had the sweetest button nose, and he had a strange rash all over his skin. He had bright blue eyes, and he had 2 tubes pierced into his chest. He had swollen skin, and he had the most kissable lips. He looked very sick in the eyes of most, and he looked absolutely perfect to me. It's incredible how the moment you see your child, you think they're the most beautiful person in the world. I had doctors warn me before I laid eyes on him that he looked different than what I probably imagined. But the moment I saw Lochlan, I knew he was my true love. But the moment I saw him wasn't right after he was born. And to tell you the story of his birth, I'll need to start at the night before, when we found out our child would have a very scary start. At 34 weeks, I came to Women's Hospital in severe pain. It had been growing inside of me for months, and that day I finally conceded that I couldn't function through the agony any longer. I hadn't slept in weeks. I couldn't lay down without feeling like my ribs were being crushed, and my skin felt like it was pulling apart. I was immediately admitted and given an ultrasound, which revealed that Lochlan had hydrops fatalis, and I was experiencing severe polyhydramnios, meaning I had way too much amniotic fluid surrounding my baby. I was immediately whisked away to another room where 3 liters of amniotic fluid were drained from my uterus, and for the first time in a month, I was able to breathe without pain. While my husband and I settled in for what we thought was going to be a long hospital stay until our baby was ready to be born, an army of the best and most brilliant doctors sat around a table, trying to make sense of what was going on. Long into the night, they discussed each and every option for a safe delivery, and in the morning, a doctor walked into our room that has since become what I can only describe as a living angel to our family. Dr. Tracy Pressey spoke to me with kindness and urgency when describing the dire situation that our baby was in. She explained that she would do her very best to keep him alive through delivery, but that there was a chance he may not make it. I felt like I was in a dream when I walked into the operating room. There was a team of doctors for me and a team for Lochlan. I think my husband counted 10 people standing to the side, just waiting to play their role in saving our baby. Because of his hydrops, Lochlan had an accumulation of fluid around his lungs that doctors were very worried would hinder his breathing once born. Without being able to inflate his lungs, he simply couldn't survive. So, before my emergency C-section, Dr. Pressey inserted a very long needle into my tummy, through my uterus, and into Lochlan's chest, removing a life-saving amount of fluid from around his lungs. Lochlan survived the delivery and was rushed to the NICU. and for the next 8 hours, I was without him. In 2014, there was no acute tech center. There were no rooms where mom and baby could stay together. I recovered in one wing of the hospital, while Lochlan was worked on in another. Because of the emergent way he arrived, I required close monitoring as well. I was cared for and watched closely until finally, after 8 hours, my nurse conceded to let me get in a wheelchair. 8 hours. I didn't see him, I couldn't hold him, I couldn't smell him or talk to him. Those 8 hours were agony for me, not because I had just been cut open, but because my child was sick and I couldn't be there with him. The second day of being in the NICU, we met our lead nurse, Tara. What a wonderful woman. Tara was like a lifeline for us in the NICU. After listening to the neonatologist update us on what was going on in rounds that morning, Tara took one look at our expressions and pulled up a chair in front of us. "What do you understand about what's going on here?" she asked us. "Nothing," I replied, with tears running down my cheeks. She then took as much time as she could to break down the information we had just been given, answering the same question about 5 times, and redirecting us to the most immediate task at hand when I asked if he was going to die. I think for anyone who hasn't had a child receiving life-saving care, it's almost impossible to imagine what it would be like in the place like the NICU. You might be able to imagine the room, the machines. Maybe you can even imagine the hum of a respirator or the smell of antiseptic. But whatever it is you see in your mind, it's nowhere close to the actual fear, shock, and total desperation of it all. There is no way to explain to you how scared and confused we were, but the people who work in the NICU understand it. They help parents navigate that fear and make us feel meaningful to the overall process of caring for our child. Every day, doctors would enter the room for rounds and ask questions about the color of Lochlan's skin, how labored his breathing was, whether his swelling was getting worse or getting better. And every time, that doctor or nurse in the room would turn to me and say, "What do you think, Mom? Is it better today?" That simple act made me feel seen as a mother. It made me feel like I had the smallest amount of control within the chaos we were stuck in. Tara taught Andrew and I to change Lochlan's diaper without bumping his chest tube. She showed us how to hold him without compromising his breathing tube. She taught me how to gently clean his skin and hair that never once touched a bathtub. Of course, the majority of Tara's time was spent keeping Lochlan alive, along with all the many doctors and nurses who spent time in his room because Lochlan required the care of 2 people at all times. The staff of the NICU are a team of unbelievably knowledgeable and talented people. No doubt BC Women's can claim that they provide some of the absolute best care in the country, and we are incredibly fortunate to have that facility in our backyard at Vancouver. Resources and time are put into training and hiring the best people in their field, and Lochlan was given more time because of that. But possibly, what you don't stop to consider is that these doctors and nurses also go out of their way to make families feel at home and feel like parents. Some of the moms and dads standing in that room are only hours into their journey of being a parent. They started in the scariest way possible, and that fear in their eyes is recognized and honored by the way a nurse shows us again and again how to hold our baby, or how a doctor explains again and again what the course of care will be. It's how the neonatologist saw the heartbreak in my eyes and the way I slumped next to my son's bed on day 15 and decided I was finally going to get to hold him. Placing Lochlan in my arms for the first time was a huge task. I wish I could show you all a picture because my words simply won't do it justice. We had 3 nurses transfer Lochlan from his bed to my arms, simply to hold and organize all the machines and tubes attached to his tiny body. A respiratory therapist helped hold his breathing tube in place so not a single breath was compromised. It was a very slow and intricate process of tenderness that got him from the incubator to me. Once he was placed in my arms, we spent the next 10 minutes having tubes rewired, taped down, taped to the chair, and taped to me. Being on the outside looking in, I'm sure it looked anything but intimate. But for Lochlan and I, it was the very first time we were skin to skin. The first time I felt the true weight of him. I held him for 2 hours and just stared into his beautiful face, gently stroking his arms and toes. I handed him back to the nurses, and all together, they transferred him back to his bed again. I went to bed that night with a very happy heart, imagining all the days that I would get to hold him, not realizing then that I had just lived through one of the 2 times I would hold him before receiving his terminal diagnosis. Every test possible was done to try and discover what was causing Lochlan to be sick. It was agony for us to watch doctors poke needles, biopsy skin, test blood again and again, only to hear them say the words, "We still don't know." It didn't seem possible that I had given birth to a baby that was so sick, no one could fix him. I wouldn't even allow myself to admit that he might not survive. My husband and I went into a sort of self-preservation mode in the last week Lochlan was with us, clinging to any good news handed to us, no matter how small. I sat and watched his stats for hours on end, not knowing if it was day or night, until finally we received the news that would divide our lives into the great before and the terrible after. We had 5 people sit in a room with us to receive his diagnosis, and all I can remember is Tara was one of them. They told us Lochlan had a genetic malformation of his CRAS gene, that it affected over 30% of his cellular makeup, and that it would not allow him to live. We were given options. All of which meant pain and a few more weeks of agony for our son. I asked if we should just wait a little longer so they could create something to cure him. I honestly did not understand that there was nothing on earth that could fix him. I heard gibberish coming out of our doctor's mouth for another few seconds before I looked at Tara's face and I understood. She was fighting back tears as best as she could, but I could tell her heart was broken. Lochlan would not live. For the next 24 hours, our family came to be with us and with Lochlan. We had our own room, and 2 nurses cared for us at all times. They slowly decreased Lochlan's meds and removed whatever needles they could from his body. Each family member held him and cried, while Andrew and I stood back watching, trying to make sense of what was happening. Doctors came and went, checking on Lochlan's level of comfort and always asking if we needed anything. When it was finally time to extubate him, the hospital made sure we had every support available to us. We had Tara, a neonatologist, a respiratory therapist, and a spiritual counselor. We were told he would live for a few minutes, maybe 30, after the tube was taken out, and with my whole body shaking, I nodded that I was ready to let him go. I won't even begin to explain the kind of strength it takes to accept that your child is about to die. But I do want you to understand the support and care we had in those terribly scary moments. A nurse wrapped a blanket around Lochlan and I, while everyone stood back and gave us the space to pour every ounce of love we had into our baby. 30 minutes passed, and Lochlan was still with us. My tears had turned silent, and I was swaying side to side with him curled under my chin. After an hour, everyone left the room, and for the first time since he was born, Andrew and I were alone with our child. We sang to him, we played soft music, we held his hands and kissed his head. We passed him back and forth, and as the night went on, we slept with him on our chests. Nurses brought us food, coffee, water, whatever we needed. We never left the room, and for a short while, it was as if he had just been born. I went from noticing details in the room with startling intensity to not noticing anything at all but the rise and fall of my son's chest. We held him in that room for 17 hours, soaking in every single second we were given. The staff of the NICU facilitated our transfer to Connect Place Children's Hospice, where we said our final goodbye to Lochlan. But we will forever we're just gonna call 911. We're gonna wait. Oh, yes. He's okay. There's a lot of nurses. There's literally a paragraph left. And you know what? That was heavy, so maybe we'll just needed a break, right? Okay. The staff in the NICU facilitated our transfer to Canuck Place Children's Hospice, where we said our final goodbye to Lochlan. But we will forever consider the room called P1 our son's home. I will never take for granted the way we were cared for at BC Women's. This place kept our son alive for 22 days. Simply put, we never would have known him if this facility did not exist. With the help of state-of-the-art technology and sophisticated medicine, we were given something priceless with our child. We were given time. Our son never came home, but we made a home with him in that little room. And this will forever be a success story because Lochlan was given the best care, the best comfort, and the best goodbye we could have possibly imagined. Your donation to the BC Women's NICU helps them acquire life-saving equipment and employ the best and most talented doctors in their fields, and that is an incredible thing. But what I hope my words shared with you tonight is that most importantly, it gives a family like mine the chance to know their son, even if only for a little while. Thank you.